Hello, and welcome to PCI Webinars. Today's webinar, Efficient Librarian, From Inbox to Done, The Simple Steps to Successful Workflow, with Douglas Crane. Doug began his career with the Palm Beach County Library System as a children's librarian in 1998, and soon moved his way up the organization, serving as the Electronic Resources Coordinator, Branch Manager, and the Director of Branch Services. He was appointed Library Director in 2014, and under his direction, the system has won numerous awards, including the Urban Library Council Innovation Award. He was recruited by the Public Library Association for their first podcast in 2015. He's also author of the article, May I Ask You a Question? Lessons Learned from Interviewing Public Library Leaders, which was published in the November-December 2015 issue of Public Libraries. And Overcoming the Email Blues in the December 2017 issue of Learning Exchange, the newsletter of the Learning Roundtable of ALA. Doug currently serves as the chair of the State Library Council of Florida and is past president of the Southeast Florida Library Information Network. Coming to you now from sunny 75 Palm Beach County, it's Doug Crane.
Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. I just see the slides, I think, are coming up. There we go. There's the presentation. Well, welcome all of you. Thank you for spending this hour of your afternoon with us here. And I'm going to talk to you about workflow, successful strategies to help you get more done quickly. And I'll give you a little more information about myself and as we go along. But first of all, just in the chat box, I'd like to know how many of you would like to get more relaxation and less stress into your work week? Just type yes or no. Yes, 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 okay. Very good. I'm not seeing anyone say that they come to work to get as much stress in their life as possible. So then you're in the right spot here, because what I've found is, just through my personal experience and through the trainings that I've been doing on this topic, that unfortunately we often self-sabotage ourselves. We are sometimes the source of our own stress. And if you don't believe me, I'll ask you this question. Have you ever missed a deadline? Have you ever forgotten something at work? Have you ever lost important documentation, like a memo or another piece of paper? Well, if you've done all this, it's because somewhere in your workflow system there's a hole or a process that's not up to speed yet. So today we're going to be really working on your internal workplace operating system to get it effectively going. So before I start with some of the information I'm going to share, I'd like to learn a little more from our participants. What got you so excited that you signed up for a workshop on productivity and actually showed up for it? What would you like to learn today? So if you could just type into the chat box some of the things you'd like to learn today. And if I'm not already covering it, I'll see about covering it before the end of the class. I see multiple attendees are typing, so as soon as something shows up, I'll let you know. Okay, someone said I'd like to advance in my career, and to do so, I've got to succeed. Yep, that's a good point. I tell people that the techniques I picked up that I'm sharing with you today are what enabled me to become the library director. Ash says better ways of streaming data flow. That's interesting. Zelda said how to stay organized and automate processes to keep track of everything. Very good. I think I'm seeing another person type here. Something new. I read a lot of efficiency materials. Okay, well, let's see if I'm going to share with you something you don't know already. Feel free to keep typing if you like, but let me move forward a bit with telling you a bit more about who I am. Thank you for the introduction, Anne. But just to clarify a bit more about the course content here. I'm currently have the honor of being director of the Palm Beach County Library System here in Southeast Florida. And back in 2011, when I was a branch manager in our library system, I recognized a need to improve my efficiency. I had a messy desk, I was missing deadlines, and I just thought there would be a way I could work a little smarter. And I happened to come across a book that transformed my life, which I'm going to share with you in a few moments. And it changed my view of how libraries and library workers should be approaching knowledge and workflow. And I took this information and packed it into a program that I call the Efficient Librarian. And I've been doing these workshops and seminars since 2012. And I've had an opportunity now to do webinars across the country and presentations all across Florida. And I was even at the Public Library Association conference last year in Philadelphia presenting on this topic. In fact, one thing that was mentioned in the introduction was I wrote an article on efficient librarianship. And if you go to the November-December 2017 issue of Public Libraries, you'll see an article called Efficient Librarianship, A New Path for the Profession, in which I mentioned that an efficient librarian is an elite knowledge worker navigating the complexities of the post-internet information world. Sounds like a big jargonful, but I'm going to break it down for you about what I mean by this. What you have to understand is that when we work, there are different types of engagement, ways that we engage with our work. And in order to be an efficient librarian, there's a few things you have to understand. First of all, you need to have a process that takes anything that shows up in your world, that you can move it through, clarify what it means to you, put it somewhere where you'll find it later, and ultimately get it done. Sort of an assembly line where something shows up, you get it through, and you get a finished product. Also, you need to manage the host of personal knowledge information, the information that you think is vitally important to your own work and your own life. There has to be a way to keep track of it, manage it, and use it to your own advantage, for creativity and to connect ideas together. And finally, you have to have some way to figure out where you're going to get the most bang for your buck when you take action. What are you going to do? What action are you going to take in any given moment to make sure you're being as productive as possible? Now, most of today's webinar is going to talk about the first topic, workflow. Because if you don't have workflow down, it's hard to do the other two topics. But I'll refer to the other two as we go through, and those will be topics for some other future webinar. But let's talk about the nature of our work, just to set the ground before I get into the actual tips and tricks that'll help you along. You have to understand that work we do can be seen along a spectrum. At one end are task jobs, sometimes known as widget jobs. And these are jobs where basically when the worker shows up, the work is defined for them. They don't have to think about it. They just go in and they do it. And in libraries, the best example of that is a shelver or a student employee, or sometimes called a page. I'm curious, out of the people in the audience, how many of you started your career in the library just shelving material? Either as a student, a shelver, a volunteer, because that was my path. I started as what was called a page for the Toronto Public Library System. So we got 2 yeses, a no, and a third yes. I'm waiting to see here. I'll give them more time. Oh, someone started straight as a librarian. Okay. So it's not uncommon for a lot of people to start their career in this role. And what's great about being a student or a shelver is this. You don't have to think too much about your job. You show up. There's a big pile of books to shelve. You put them on a cart, you organize them, you wheel them out, you put them on the shelves, and you know you're done when the cart's empty. And if you have a student employee I call them student employees because that's what we refer to them here in Palm Beach County, but if you have a student employee who knows what they're doing, they'll go back, get another cart, and repeat the process. Now, the thing about this, the job might be boring, the job might be dull, but it's very rarely stressful. Why? Because it's very well defined. You know exactly what you need to do, you know what the victory conditions are, and you're getting success all day. You know, you're getting books away, empty carts. You can say, hey, I accomplished something. It's very clear. But unfortunately, we're all in a category called a knowledge job. And the difference between a task job is in a knowledge job, no one is defining the work for you. You have to define it yourself. You have to decide, what it is you're trying to accomplish. You have to decide what winning means in the job. You have to decide all these different things. For example, for me as the library director, I have to make a lot of decisions that no one else can tell me what they are. For example, I have to decide how we're going to allocate our budget. I have to decide how we're going to keep our operating hours. I have to decide on matters of policy. I have to decide how we're going to allocate our staffing across our 18 locations. I have to decide how to so on and so on and so on. And that's the role of me as a library director, is I have to figure these things out based on my own experience, my own knowledge, and the best practices of the profession. And the thing is with knowledge work is it can lead to some very stressful things. First of all, knowledge work can be stressful if you don't know what your goal is. I mean, how many of you would like to play a game that you don't know how to win, right? Probably not many of you. It'd be too frustrating. Well, sometimes our work feels that way, that it's like a game we're playing, but we don't know what the victory conditions are, how to win. Now, you might know what goal you want, but if you don't have an idea of what your next action is to move it forward, what are you supposed to do? Who are you supposed to call? What are you supposed to write to move it forward? It can get very frustrating. Now, even if you know what the goal is and you know what you're going to do to move it forward, if you don't keep track of things in a system that you trust, that's going to remind you when deadlines pop up or important meetings pop up, or keep track of every project you have, you're risking forgetting things. And let me put this quite simply. Has anyone ever forgotten anything? You can, let me just quick poll. Anyone forgotten anything? Yes or no? Yes. Oh, never. Yeah, right. Well, obviously forgetting something important at work can lead to what was the question? Have you ever forgotten anything? And the answer for most of you is probably yes, because you're human. And the catch of that is, at work, if we forget something, it's very easy for us to miss a deadline, and then that becomes a source of stress. So here's a quick poll for you. I want to know how many of you ever heard of this book, Getting Things Done by David Allen. And I'll give you a few categories here. Have you never heard of it? Glanced at the back cover? Read some or all of it? Read it and applied a few pieces? Or are you a full-fledged GTDer? Well, I'm hearing a lot of people have never heard of it. Never heard of it? Never, never, never? Okay, well, then you're in for a treat, though. Oh, someone's heard of GTD. Excellent. Okay, and someone's read and applied some of it. Very good. This is the core text for our course today. I came across this book in 2011, and it transformed the way I approach work because it basically provides a very systematic approach to handling anything that comes into your world, to keep track of it, to organize it, to clarify it, and to ultimately get stuff done, as the title presents. David Allen was a management consultant, and he used to work with big companies, Fortune 500 types. But what he found was a lot of these companies, they'd have these big blue sky visions, but they always stumbled in the implementation because little things happening in the weeds distracted everybody, and they could never get back to the full big picture. So he decided, as his consultant work, is to assemble a whole bunch of best practices that he could give to these people to get the day-to-day out of the way to accomplish big things. And he ended up calling the system Getting Things Done, or GTD for short. He wrote a best-selling book, and the book's been around now for almost 20 years. And it's become an international bestseller. In fact, Getting Things Done is now done around the world. In fact, they're going to be having their global conference in Amsterdam in the end of June. Unfortunately, it overlaps with ALA, otherwise I would be there. But it's truly become a global phenomenon. So if you're going to read one book in the next month, I challenge you to pick up Getting Things Done by David Allen. I guarantee you probably have it in your library right now. Now, in David Allen's work, he presents this idea called the workflow diagram. It's a core system about how you can handle everything. Because you see, ultimately, what we are, even as knowledge workers, we do have a widget or a task, a little item that we're moving through our lives. And that little widget item, and a widget, if you've never heard the term, is like a term used in industrial academia, where they talk about the item of production moving through a system. Well, we do have an item of production as a knowledge worker. It's the note. Now, notes come in various shapes and sizes. It can be the sticky note you get on your desk. It can be a written document, even a memo. It could be a phone voicemail. It could be an email. It could be any kind of thing, any artifact that's carrying information. Because if you understand that a lot of your work is really around the movement of these information artifacts to create things, then this workflow diagram will make sense as kind of an assembly line idea. And I'm referring to a workflow diagram. There are two handouts in the download section, which I suggest you go ahead and download them while we're talking here. One is the workflow diagram, which will come up in a couple screens, and the other is a bibliography that I'll touch on at the end of the class. But David Allen recognizes, and this is core for GTD, that there are 5 stages of workflow. That is, things that come into your world pass through these 5 stages. The first is you have to capture things. When stuff shows up, you want to capture it and not miss anything. Whatever you capture, you have to clarify, decide what it means to you. Does it have any value? Once you've clarified it, you got to put it somewhere so that you can find it again or trash it and get it out of your world. Then Because you have a system, you have to reflect on it from time to time to make sure it's running effectively. And then when you have the discretionary time to take action, you have to engage with it and decide what's the best bang for your buck at any given time. So it starts really with understanding your inbox. A lot of people don't really understand how important the inbox is to workflow. And inboxes come in different shapes and sizes. There's the box that you have in the corner on your desk to capture paper and other physical artifacts. So right now, the very first tip I'll give you is, if you do not have a small box in the corner of your desk designed to capture physical items, go ahead and get one. Because if you don't have one of those, then your entire desk becomes your inbox. Or even worse, your entire office space becomes your inbox. It's not a matter of having an inbox, it's how big do you want to define the space. So I recommend just defining it down to a corner of your desk so that you can identify when new stuff shows up in your world. Also, a type of inbox is a notepad. If you're writing down notes based on this seminar or any meeting you're attending, you have used it as a capture tool. And here's what I recommend. If you have a notepad that you're using in a meeting, as soon as you get back to your desk, tear out the pages that you wrote on and put them in your inbox for processing. I've done a lot of implementation at desks with people in the GTD system. And what I can tell you right away is that we found a lot of notepads and other items in drawers that were captured but never processed. So they just basically wasted their time. One thing I'll share just before I go further that's important to say is I am not a certified GTD trainer. I'm not trained by David Allen Company. I'm not one of their official trainers. However, I am a friend of the David Allen Company. We've talked a lot. They've actually profiled me on their website, and they're happy with me sharing this material with libraries and library staff. I just can't say that I'm a certified trainer. So with that little proviso out of the way, let me talk more about inboxes. Another type of inbox is your voicemail. And we don't get a lot of voicemail, but what we do, we need to capture. And finally, a big inbox is your email. And email is often the inbox that people fall out of control with very quickly. The techniques you're going to hear today will apply to all these types of inboxes. Now, there are some ineffective inboxes, things that should not be an inbox. Let me see if you've had this experience. Who's come back to their desk and found on their chair something waiting for them that they wanted people to get attention? Just write in the chat box. Have you ever come back to your desk and found something on your chair other than your butt? Yeah. Now, why do people do that? Why do people put stuff on your chair? Well, it's because you either A, don't have an inbox that they could put it in, or B, they know that your inbox is not working because there's a big pile of stuff in it, so they're putting it on your chair. It's kind of a cry for attention. And it's a very common thing to see in offices. But if you train people and you manage your inbox effectively, there'll be no need for people to put it on your chair. Oh, okay. I see someone else saying, my inbox is on the other side of the office, so I don't even use it. Well, Ash, I certainly recommend go ahead, bring it to your desk. Get it convenient. Because that inbox is not only used for other people, but it's used for you as well to drop stuff. Here's another thing. Has anyone ever come back and found sticky notes on their computer? Anyone had the sticky note on the computer when they get back, right? This is a pretty common one too. Why do they put the sticky note on your computer? Well, it's obviously because they don't trust you to look at your email or your inbox. And again, they're trying to get around a system that you're not even using, right? Finally, the least effective inbox is your head. Don't believe me? Well, let me see if you've ever had this scenario. Has anyone ever walked down the hall and you meet one of your colleagues, say Mary, and Mary asks you to do ABC for her? And you say, no problem, Mary, I'll do ABC. Then you walk a little further down the hall and you meet Joe, and Joe asks you to do XYZ. Well, imagine what probably happened to your guarantee for Mary if you didn't write it down. It probably fell out the other side of your head. So then 2 weeks later, Mary's going to show up at your office and say, hey, you promised to do ABC for me. You're like, oh, yeah, I'm getting to it. You know, that's never a fun situation to be in. So the trick is, and this is actually one of David Allen's big cardinal rules with GTD, is get stuff out of your head. There's a really practical reason why this is useful other than the fact that you might forget it. It's also that things are easier to process when they're in front of you rather than inside of you. If you write something down and you see it outside of you, it's easier to work with it. You can be more objective with it. If it's sitting in your head, it's very hard. It's a jumble. You can't really tell. So as a community service here, I'm going to ask you all to do this little exercise with me. Grab a piece of paper, or if you got your iPad with you or something, to write down things. Some external thing that's not going to distract you from the webinar. You can quickly write down stuff on. We're going to do what's called a mind sweep. We're going to go through your head very quickly to see if there's anything on your mind that you want to get out of your mind and into a note. For example, and as I list these items, go ahead. If stuff pops in your head, start writing it down. Maybe there's a project you're working on that you need to get out there. There's some next action to do with it. Go ahead, write down what that is. Have you made any commitments to people recently? Committing to meetings, committing to being somewhere, committing to lunch, committing to do a project. If you don't have that written down somewhere, go ahead and put it down. How about upcoming meetings? Is there anything you need to do to prepare for an upcoming meeting? Taking a moment to review the agenda or prepare your piece that you're going to present. Or if you just had a meeting, was there any items you committed to doing that you need to track and get down? How about staffing challenges? For those of you who are supervisors, do you have any hire, fire, counseling, coaching, things like that you need to do that you haven't done yet? How about noteworthy events? Easter's coming up. Do you need to schedule the Easter breakfast or lunch or get the eggs ready? Or there are birthdays, anniversaries, or important meetings and other events coming up? If they're not on your calendar, make sure they are. Oh, here's a big one, waiting for. Have you ever asked someone to do something for you? Well, if you have, it's a good idea to keep track of when you ask them to do it. Otherwise, if they forget and you forget, the item's lost forever. Also, professional development. Are there other ideas? Maybe some other Florida Library webinars that you want to attend. If you don't have them on your calendar or in a note somewhere for you to sign up, go ahead and write some of that down. What about books to read? I already recommended Getting Things Done. And there's a bibliography of other books that you might want to read that I have in the download section. Maybe record those. What about financial concerns? Do you need to check up on your last paycheck or make sure your auto pay is working on that bill program that you set up? Things like that. Or maintenance issues. Your card need an oil change? Do you need to go to the doctor? Some repairs needed at work or at home? All these are just little things that you might have that might be percolating around your head. When I do my live seminars on this, we spend 10 minutes just going through and writing down one thing at a time to get them out of our head and in front of us. Because the studies have shown, if you write stuff down, you're far more likely to do it than if it only exists in your head. So now that I've told you to write all this stuff down, you might be thinking, oh great, now I just have my actions in front of me. What am I going to do with it? Well, here's the solution. It's called the workflow diagram. And this is a free handout from the David Allen Company, and it's the copy of what you'd find in the Getting Things Done book. It is your assembly line to take any of these items, these notes you've created, moving them from your in-basket to done in a very efficient format. So we're going to start breaking, for most of the rest of the seminar is breaking this down. But before we go further, I need you all to take the inbox oath with me. I can't see you, so I'm going to have to assume that you're doing this. But put one hand over your heart and the other hand up in the air. And please repeat after me. My inbox is not a storage location. It is a processing station. Very good. You can put your hands down. Hopefully you all did this. Because what I'm trying to get across to you is this. If you try and use your inbox as a way to manage workflow, to keep track of actionable items, to keep track of things you're waiting for, to keep track of reference material, good ideas, and all that other stuff, the box is not designed to do that. It's highly inefficient. The best thing it does is let you know about new content. That's what it does perfectly. It's like the light on your phone. When you get a message and it blinks, you know you have a message. If you never address that, you'll never know if you have new messages. Same with your inbox. If just rethinking this approach to your inbox will transform the way you do work. So what are the rules for best inbox practices? Well, when you have some time to sit down and clear out your inbox, here's some basic rules. You got to start from one end and go to the other. No rifling through it, picking and choosing what seems the juiciest. For good professional knowledge worker starts at one end and goes steadily through to the other. Now, which end you start with is not really important, but I generally recommend looking at the newest stuff first. And this is especially true in email, where we have all these threads. And if you just handle the most recent thread, you'll see the entire conversation so that you can quickly discard the other parts of the conversation as you clear the box. Now, once you pick something up, it's glued to your hand or mouse cursor until you decide what it means to you. No looking at it, scratching your head confused, and putting it away. Make a really sensible adult decision about what it is, or at least take your best guess on it. Then, once you've decided, you're going to move it out of your inbox, and it never goes back. The cardinal sin of inbox management is returning stuff to the inbox because you haven't taken the time to decide what it means to you. Now, if you look at the workflow diagram, there are two big questions right at the top of the workflow diagram. The first is, what is it? So when you pick up an item from the inbox and you look at it, you got to decide what it is and what it means to you. So maybe you picked up an item and it's an update to the dress code. It says, no more flip-flops allowed in the office. Okay, so now that you've identified what it is, it's a memo telling you no more flip-flops. Great. The next question is it actionable? And there are only two possible answers to this question. Anyone want to guess what those are? Correct, yes or no. So, here we go. What if it's no? Well, just say you read the memo, you look down, you realize you wore your loafers today, not the flip-flops. You go, I'm good. I don't even own flip-flops. Why do I need this? Well, you still have this piece of paper. And if you just put it down, it's going to haunt you till the end of your days. So you need to do something with the actual paper document itself. One option is just to trash it, throw it out, say, stupid document, toss it away. Another option for some documents is that they're a someday maybe or a good idea. And I'm going to talk more about this category in a few minutes. The third possible category is reference. That is, you just want to park it somewhere. Because maybe you never wear flip-flops, but you have student employees who walk in who wear flip-flops, so you're going to need to pull out the memo and show it to them. So you want to keep it handy. So reference material is sort of a whole class in itself. And in fact, before I go further, let me ask you this question. How many of you have piles of reference material on your desk? Just type yes or no if you have reference material sitting on your desk, like files, folders. Okay, well, some of you are pretty good. We got 2 yeses, 2 nos, 3 yeses, 3 nos. Okay, some of you are pretty good about this. I emphasize this because sometimes when I've gone to people's offices, the very first thing they need to do is handle out-of-control reference material. Leaving reference material out in your workspace, it just clutters it up. It causes your mind to get distracted. So you need to file it away, put it away in an effective way, close by so if you need it and you want it, you can get it, but not too far from you that you never think to get it or never take the energy to file it. So I highly recommend if you've got files on your desk, start finding ways to park them off into a reference cabinet, a filing cabinet, somewhere out of the way, or decide even if you need them anymore. The more you can clear out of your world, the more effective you're going to be. Now, let's go back and say that that item you pulled out of your inbox actually was actionable. You said, yes, I got to do something about this. Well, you then have to ask yourself the question, what is the next action? That is, what's the next physical thing I need to do to move this forward so it can be done and out of my world? What do physical actions look like? Well, they can include calling someone, or making a note, drafting a document, doing a mind map brainstorm. It could be typing a response to someone, or pulling up Word and starting to draft a document. Or it could be getting off your butt, walking down the hall and talking to a colleague. All these are things that people can see you doing. Now, a lot of people, if they're not sure what to do, they'll say, oh, I want to think about it. And what they don't do is define what they're going to do with this item while they're thinking about it. Quite often, it goes into a pile called, I'll get to you later. And the get to you later pile starts to grow and grow and grow until it's an out-of-control monster. So what you need to do is responsibly manage. Even if you say, I need some time to consider this, park it somewhere and set yourself a reminder of when you're going to go back and look at it. If you think you need 2 days, great. Park it off to the side and say a reference folder and say in 2 days I'm coming back to it and make it a note in your calendar. Now, there's 2 more questions once you've decided what the next action is. The first is whether this is part of a project. Now, in GTD, they have a very broad definition of project. It's anything that requires more than one action to complete. So here's a challenge. Here's a question for you all, and I'd like you to type a yes or no in the box. Is buying milk, that nice white beverage that you get from cows, is buying milk a project? Just type yes or no. What do you think? Is buying milk a project? Let's see. Hopefully this is the toughest question you have to answer all day. Oh, yes, 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 yes. Okay, sure. All right. A lot of you agree, and some of you are on the fence because you don't want to type in your answer. But that is the correct. Oh, one person said no. Unfortunately, the correct answer is yes. Buying milk is a project. Here's why. If you open up your fridge and you realize, oops, there's no milk, what do you have to do? You have to get in your car, go to the store, go to the milk aisle, pick a milk jug, buy it, drive back home, and put it in your fridge. That's a lot of next actions that you need to do to move this forward. Because if you, now the thing is, of course, buying milk sounds silly on its own, but usually buying milk is part of a larger project called buying groceries. And I'm sure a lot of you have already mastered the idea of making a grocery list. Because if you don't have a list, then the idea is you'll open the fridge and go, oh, no milk. And then you'll walk off, and when you're at the store, you'll forget that you needed milk. And then you'll come home and go, darn, no milk. Forgot it again. And then you just have to eat dry cereal. So now that example is a little different, but the idea is, look, anything that you want to get done, if you know it's that doing the next action will not write it off your list, you need to have some tentpole to keep track of it. So one idea to do that is to create a project list, just a simple list naming every project that you have on your plate. If you do this, you're going to find that you have probably 40 to 60 different projects out there. Now, some projects won't even make it to the list because it might take 3 actions, but you're going to do them all at the same time. But other projects might linger. And if you have those lingering projects, I mean, a lot of us have a lingering project sitting there, just been sitting there for months. And the only reason it hasn't moved any further forward is because either we've forgotten it exists or we haven't defined the next action on it. And if you just take a moment to find the next action, you might find that dusty project will quickly get completed. There's another question to ask yourself too, and it's this. Will this next action take less than 2 minutes to complete? And this is David Allen's famous 2-minute rule. If you identify something that you can do in under 2 minutes, go ahead and do it right away. Don't waste your time trying to store it somewhere to do later. There's 2 reasons why this works. One is, if you try and store it, it'll actually take more energy to store it and then try and come back to it. But more importantly is, you'll get a quick win. Remember I talked about knowledge work, that sometimes it's hard to define your wins and get wins? Well, the 2-minute rule is a great win generator throughout the day. If you recognize, oh, I can get this done right away, go ahead and do it. Boom, 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 done. And once you're done, you really move forward fast. You can get a lot of energy. You can get a real sense of accomplishment at the end of the day. In fact, I say if you're going to take just one thing to test out of this workshop, do the 2-minute rule. You won't, I guarantee you, you'll get so many benefits from it, you'll wonder why you hadn't done it years ago. Now, if you've moved an item this far, you'll recognize now there are only 3 possible things left you can do with this item. The first is you could just go ahead and do it anyway, even if it's going to take longer than 2 minutes. There's some items that you might look at and say, it's going to take 10 minutes, but it's going to make get my boss off my back. Let me go ahead and do it. Put everything else on hold. That's great. Second option is it might be delegating it. You'll recognize, oh, I'm not the one to take the next action. It might be one of my people I supervise should be doing this. Or you might be, hey, my boss really needs to be the one to make the decision on it. Let me pass it up to him or her. Or maybe it's an IT issue or a finance issue. You got to move it forward. The other thing, though, is a lot of stuff, if you're clearing out your inbox, there's stuff you have to do, but you don't have time to do it now. So you got to defer it. Park it somewhere where you can find it again when you do have the time and energy to do it. So in order to make this work, this whole system work, you need to set up a set of functional folders. These are different from the folders where you normally just stash your reference material. These are folders that you're going to do transactional stuff through. The first folder is an action folder. And you can make these in paper, and you can make these on your email. But here's what I want you to do for your physical documents. Make a paper folder and call it action. And what happens is any paper file that comes across that you have to do something with, but you're not ready to do it right now, park it in action. Or if you have a reminder of something that you need to do, park it in action. That way, when you do have the time, instead of looking through your whole world for what to do next, just open up the action folder and you'll see a very tight menu of things that you can do at any given time. Now, some of you might think one action folder might get really big. Well, it is possible to subdivide it into a few specialty folders, like, for example, make a folder for your boss. So when you have a weekly meeting with her and you have stuff that's not critical that needs to be addressed immediately, you can park it there. And then when you go to meet with draft up the agenda for your meeting, you open up that folder and there's everything right there. If you have people you supervise, same idea. Make a folder for each one of them, park non-critical stuff in it, and then when you meet with them and they talk with you about their stuff, you can open up your folder and talk to them about your stuff. Another type of folder is waiting for. This is where you want to park reminders of things that you sent out into the world. Has anyone ever sent something out into the world and someone's failed to get back to them? I think this is a common situation, right? That you send something out and you wait weeks and weeks and there's no response. Well, if you don't leave yourself a reminder of when you contacted them and what the item was, there's a chance you'll forget it. And if you forget it, then that item is now lost forever. If you've recorded when you talked to them and when you and the date that you sent the item to them, when you follow up, you can remind them, oh yeah, I sent this to you on Friday. Follow up. Another type of folder is Someday Maybe. This is where you park good ideas. We get good ideas all the time, except the problem is a lot of good ideas we're not ready to take action on yet. We don't have the time, the energy, or the resources, or the permission to do it. But we don't want to lose them. So you want to create a folder where you can park good ideas. Just put them off to the side so that they're not forgotten, and you can check them from time to time to see if you want to activate them. And the final folder I'll recommend creating is a read review folder. This is where you park like articles and magazines that you'd like to get to that don't have a time limit on them. So you can park them there and read them whenever you want. That way you get them out of your action flow and your other flows, and then if you get good ideas out of them, you can copy the ideas over to take action on them or turn them into Someday Maybes for later. So you can do this in your email as well. Here's a screenshot from my email, and you'll see on the side a series of folders: action, read review, Someday Maybe, and waiting for. And you'll see they're a little different because I have the @ symbol in front of them. This pulls them up to the top of the list, and it makes it very easy to quickly sort stuff into them. Okay, so here's my final poll for you all, and I'd like you to all take your best guess. How often should you completely empty your inbox, whether it's paper or electronic? Okay, I got every day, every day. What else we got out there? Who else? As often as possible. At least weekly. Okay, once a day. Actually, you must all have taken a seminar with me before, because that's the principle. You want to effective inboxes should be emptied every 24 to 48 hours. Because if you followed the system that I'm outlining here, it's very easy to maintain this. In fact, I have maintained Inbox Zero, as it's sometimes called, since 2011 when I first read Getting Things Done. And I'll tell you right now, there's no sweeter space to operate out of. You're right on top of the game. You know what's out there. Your mind is clear and ready to go. If you keep everything clear every 24 to 48 hours, there'll be fewer opportunities for surprises, fewer opportunity things to get in your way and add more stress into your life. So what I'm going to recommend is this. Right as soon as this webinar is done, anything that you use to minesweep or any material you have lingering around in inboxes or on your desk, go ahead, print off a copy of the workflow diagram, and then start picking up items and going one at a time and moving them through this process. And just seeing how that helps clear up your space and helps reduce your stress load. Because I'll tell you right now, I've used the workflow diagram for so long it's just automatic in my mind. But for the first bunch of times, I would suggest going consciously through it each step, asking the questions that it says, defining it out, writing down what your next action is on the item, and then moving it and parking it where you need to do or getting it out of your world. That's one of the things I really try and tell my students is this. Webinars are great to get intellectual material, but if you don't actually take action on the things that got your attention, then you've just simply entertained yourself for an hour. I really want you to take away something very practical here. So commit to yourself, if not right as soon as the webinar is done, by the end of tomorrow, by the end of your work week Friday, to go ahead, test the workflow diagram, and give it a shot. I guarantee you that this is something that millions of people around the world doing GTD have found benefit from. So I think if you give it a try, you'll find it's useful as well. Okay, to wrap up the 5 stages workflow, let's talk about making sure the system works well. Because any system you create, if you don't give it some loving attention from time to time, it can start to fall apart, and then you won't trust it anymore. So the core recommendation in GTD is to do a weekly review. And a weekly review is this. Towards the end of your work week, plot out a couple hours where you can sit down and first empty out all your inboxes. Make sure you're current. Get anything that's just showed up in your world, get it out of you, get it organized, clarified, etc. Then once you got that done, start going through all your action folders, all your waiting for folders. Go through all those and just make sure that the things in there are still meant to be in those folders. Because if your work week has gone by fast, someone might have gotten back to you on something that doesn't need to sit in your waiting for folder anymore. Or you might have taken action on an item so you don't need it in your action folder anymore. Do that. Then open up your calendar. Look over the last 2 weeks to see if there was anything that you missed from a meeting or another project, etc., and make sure that you tidy that up. Then start looking ahead on your calendar as far as you want to go to see what's coming up and if there's anything you need to prepare. For example, maybe you have a meeting coming up and you need to prepare a presentation. Or you see you have a vacation coming up, so you need to plan to make sure your work is done prior to that vacation. Things like that. Or maybe there's a conference deadline coming up and you want to put in an application. You got to make sure you meet the deadline. So those are things to pay attention to. The other thing is to be creative. Once you've cleared the decks, you've got yourself in order, you'll find that your psychic bandwidth, your mental capacity to work has now increased. Good time to crack open the Someday Maybe folder and look at those good ideas to see what you can move forward. It's a fun, creative time that you can use for yourself. Now, if you're up to date, the final thing is just to start engaging with stuff on your list. And this is really where priorities kick in. And a lot of people get hung up on what's their most important thing they can do at any given time. And GTD is very simple in terms of saying, look, once you've got a certain amount of time and a certain amount of energy, go through what you have available and decide what best matches your current state. If you're tired and you only got 10 minutes, you can't start on those big, intensive projects. But if you've got a few small little things you can kick out in a few minutes, go ahead and do those. At least get something done to match your level. Conversely, if you're very excited, got lots of energy, and you got a lot of time, this is a good opportunity to tackle those bigger projects. Okay. So let's say quickly, as a little quiz, let's see how much you paid attention here. First of all, what were the 5 stages of workflow? Let's review them. They were capture, make sure you get everything that comes into your world. Clarify, decide what those items mean to you. Organize them, put the items in spots where you'll find them later, or get rid of them if they're not necessary. Reflect, take at least once a week to look through your system to make sure it's up to date and where you need it to be. And the final stage is engage. Decide in the time you have available what's the best actions you can take given your circumstances. Okay. What were the names of the functional folders that I recommended creating? They were the action folder for stuff that you want to get done as soon as possible. The waiting for folder for things that you want to get back to you but you sent out into the world for other people to take action on. The Someday Maybe folder to store good ideas, and the Read Review folder to keep track of anything that you'd like to read, whether personally or professionally, that doesn't have a time limit attached to it. And then finally, what's the standard for an empty inbox? Well, it's right there. You're all pretty good with this one. About every 24 to 48 hours. Okay. So as we close down here and open the floor for questions in a few moments, I want to leave you with some ideas of why it's important to even do this. Why go through all this trouble? Well, first of all, if you're working, you're going to have to do something like this anyway. You are already doing these 5 stages. It's just better to bring clarity and order to them rather than just handling them haphazardly. But I also am very much inspired by this statement that David Allen has made many times called the strategic value of clear space. What this means for me is, look, if you live in a workspace that's cluttered, and whether it's physical or electronic workspace, it's cluttered, that has stuff all over the place, you're going to spend a lot of time just trying to reorient yourself in that space, trying to figure out, or you're spending a lot of mental energy blocking out the things that you don't want to do, and it can get very tiring with that. But if you clear out a space, you have an empty space ready to work in, with stuff put where it's supposed to be, your mind can relax. And the more you relax as a knowledge worker, the stronger you can be creatively, I don't know if that's a real word, but the more creative you can be, the more spontaneous you can be, and the more you can handle the day-to-day stress. You have a lot more bandwidth to absorb the surprises that might pop up as you move through your day. So for me, as a former yoga teacher, I really value having clear mind. And to have a clear workspace, I sometimes think of this as the yoga of work. How do you handle the emails coming in so you can get them done effectively, efficiently, so you don't have to worry about it? Because if you're like me, you probably don't want to take work home on the evenings and weekends if you don't have to. Well, for me, even as a director of a large organization that has a lot happening, I take very little home on the weekend. Many weekends I don't do anything around work, other than maybe the good ideas that pop in my head, I'll save them away. Because they don't pay me for the weekends, right? They pay me to work. So if you practice these techniques, I think you'll start realizing the strategic value that clear space, mentally and physically, has to offer. So I want to give you a few resources to go away with. One is the bibliography that's available in the downloads. Another is I have a website, efficientlibrarian.com, and it's where I muse and point out great resources and stuff on productivity, efficiency, and librarianship. It's a WordPress site, so if you go there, you can sign up as a WordPress member or use your email to follow me when I do a blog post. I try not to do more than 1 or 2 a week because I don't want to overwhelm you all with additional emails that I'm trying to tell you already how to clear. But if you want to stay in touch with me, this is one way to do it. Also, I highly recommend going to gettingthingsdone.com, the official website for the David Allen Company. If you haven't read the book, put that on the top of your list to go and get. I was rather excited to hear that later in the year they're going to be putting out a workbook version of Getting Things Done. So you don't have to kind of pull the work pieces out of the book itself. There'll be a nice workbook that you can start from one end and work through the other to get yourself organized. So with that, we've reached the conclusion of my presentation. I want to thank you all for your time and attention. And at this point, I will open the floor for any questions that you may have. Go ahead and type them into the chat box. We've got about 9 minutes till the 3 o'clock hour.
Great presentation, Doug. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Doug?
Thank you. Any workflow, okay, Zeta asks, any workflow programs you recommend? I know there are some workflow programs out there. I've often heard OmniFocus as one that I think David Allen has used himself. So those are some systems, but a lot of the power in these techniques is that they're systematic. They don't rely on any one particular program, even though there are apps and other things you can add on to programs like Outlook and such to mimic some of these GTD ideas. The great thing about I've found is I don't use any of that. I'm just adapting them into the current structure very simply and easily. Because my idea and my philosophy is it's got to be simple, it's got to be easy. If I have to maintain something else, I'm probably not going to do it. So yeah, if you really want a workflow program, OmniFocus is the one that I've heard the most about.
I was really shocked at how many people had not heard of Getting Things Done today. Because, a few years ago, it was everywhere. Everybody knew about it.
Yeah. Well,
it's
still
out there. Fallen out of favor, or is it just that it goes in waves?
I think it's more it goes in waves. Sometimes books get excited, people read them, and then they kind of shift away, and the attention goes to something else. So it's just like anything; it pops up into the media focus and then drifts away. But I certainly live by it. I call it my workplace Bible to get things done. So
I actually bought products to assist with it. I have a few things that I use that are sort of getting things done lessons that I learned. Keeping things in front of you and stuff like that. So I do try to use a lot of the methods.
Oh, there's also a book he came out with last year called Getting Things Done for Teens, which is actually in many ways a simplified version of the book, of the original book. In fact, I've heard it mentioned that a lot of people have read Getting Things Done for Teens and found it more clear than the original book. So And apparently, it's even good for teens as well. So that's another recommendation. I don't know if I have it on the. Actually, I don't think I put it on the bibliography. I should add it there. But getting things done for teens is another version they have out there.
I was actually surprised at how quickly you can learn the techniques, because
Mm-hmm.
it really doesn't take much if you track through it.
Yeah, they're all pretty good. And one thing I'll say is, I know a lot of you are at your own institution, but in my workshops, I get people to pair up to go through an exercise of processing things through the workflow diagram. And that process duplicates kind of a coaching process. And what I've found is for a lot of people, having someone there who can walk them through, who can coach them along, because oftentimes if we've got something, we're the only person trying to understand what it is, it can be very challenging. But if you bring in another perspective, it can make it easier to move through the system and move something along. Especially if you're trying to tidy up a workspace. If you can have someone who is going to be there to support you and you're now responsible towards, that can be a great way too. In fact, there's another one we didn't include here, but if you Google Getting Things Done, you can also find their PDF on how to organize your workspace. So if you do like GTD, Organize Your Workspace, you'll find a great PDF that will help you go through the steps of getting your physical environment in order.
I'll put a plug in for my own program. I'm doing one on, I believe it's May 30th, about the 25 things you need in your workspace, or 20 things you need in your workspace and can't live without. And these are things that I'm recommending people get, whether or not their employer provides them for them. So you get them anyway, in this cheap and easy way to organize.
Oh, very good. Well, that's a great follow-up then. So go ahead and sign up for the next workshop.
There you go.
So anyway, I don't see any other questions. So either I was an incredible teacher or you weren't paying attention one way or the other. I'll just live under the delusion that I was an incredible teacher. But if you want to contact me about anything, again, my website's there, efficientlibrarian.com, or you can contact me through the website as well. Or if you want to contact me in my office, I've got two numbers, a number and an email address. Always love to hear from people who've tried some of the techniques, so feel free to contact me. And if you got any questions you were too shy to ask in the webinar here, go ahead and you can email me offline.
Great. Well, thank you, Doug. Great presentation. Excellent ideas. Thank you for doing it for us, and thank you all for being here and participating. That's always fun to see how people are doing things in their own life. And we hope to see you again soon at another PCI webinar. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Okay, thank you all very much.